And welcome fans, entrepreneurs, and small business owners to another edition of myStartUp.Live. Today we have a guest here from Southern California, from Irvine actually, just nearby, Adam Ierymenko.
Hey.
Adam. Adam is the CEO of ZeroTier, which is a new tech company in the tech space here in Orange County. Let's start off by just giving a quick description of ZeroTier, and we'll go back to kind of the details.
Okay. What we specialize in doing is we basically make smart software that simplifies computer networking. So if you have like a really complicated network setup, you've got maybe a company with 4 or 5 different offices, and you've got stuff in the cloud, mobile things, remote workers. If you do things the conventional way, what you usually end up with is what I call the networking Rube Goldberg machine. So you've got your VPN gateways and your port forwards and your tunnels and all these other different complicated things, and IT people spend tremendous amounts of time managing all of that. What we have is something that makes connecting computers together as easy as joining a conference call or a Slack channel. Sometimes I describe it as like Slack for machines.
Easy enough. So each just like a channel, basically, that all those different devices can connect to or join in on. Yeah. And then a conversation can take place in that channel, which is data transfer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all direct. So if you have 2 devices in the same building, the traffic doesn't leave the building. If you have 2 devices in the same city, the traffic usually doesn't leave the city. Yeah. So it's very efficient, it's low latency.
You're saving time for the data transfer as well as complexity for those devices to connect.
So instead of setting up all that manual tunneling and all the rest of that stuff, you just sort of create a network, which is kind of like creating a chat room. And then you take all your different devices, and ZeroTier software runs on almost everything. And you just join that network with those devices, and now the devices can all communicate like they're on the same network.
Well, this is definitely a solution that many of us need, because right now it is a connected world. I mean, everyone has a device, whether it's in your home or in your office or even on location. You have tons of devices that are involved. Yeah. You have screens, you have mobile devices, you have laptops, you have streaming devices, you have servers. And they're all trying to talk to each other. And that's really what a network was all about, is this getting it able to connect data and conversations.
Well, in the early days of the internet, like way, way back, it was actually really easy because everything was stationary and it just had an IP address. But then the internet got more complicated. We added, firewalls and things like that, and then also everything got mobile. So now everything moves around all the time.
And there's always the issue of security, right? So I mean, that's probably also a motivator for systems engineers and even just people that are out there making a production, is to maintain security of all that data.
Yeah. So what our software lets you do is it gives you the same kind of convenience that you had back in the old days, where everything just had an IP address that never changed, but you get encryption, you get security, you get access control, and you get mobility. When something moves around, its address doesn't change.
So it's a unique tag for that device that is identified from all the other devices as well.
Yeah, it's all based on encryption, and it uses basically like an encryption key as your identity. So that device has a key that identifies it, that also protects the traffic to and from the device.
Okay, so it's security built into the device as well as on the network itself.
Yeah.
One thing I like about your story, Adam, is you have a background that isn't necessarily 100% tech-based. You were in even the production world to a degree, in the hardware production world.
It was tech-based, though.
Okay, sure.
Prior to founding ZeroTier, I worked as a software engineer for Red Digital Cinema. Yeah. So I implemented some like high-performance image processing kind of stuff for them. Nothing to do with computer networking.
Sure.
But it was software engineering and algorithms and stuff like that. I've always been in some kind of technology, but I've done different things in technology.
But they were trying to improve the quality of an image. Yeah. And that was really the goal, was to perfect the quality of the image.
Yeah, and the processing speed. So if you've got a giant full-length movie on a PC, being able to rapidly transcode it or do effects on the image or this kind of thing.
So how did you get your training? Let's go back to your your background in education. How'd you get your training? What inspired you to get in this space?
So I'm one of these people that started programming when I was a little kid. My mom says I wrote my first program when I was 5. I don't really remember. It was probably something really simple on like one of those old computers that you plug into a TV set, like a Commodore VIC-20. But I was doing machine code, I remember, by the time I was 10 or 11. I was doing C and all these other languages when I was a teenager. I learned about computer networking. Of course, this was back in the 90s, so it wasn't as big of a deal back then.
Sure.
But I got really into hacking when I was a teenager because I was bored and I was a teenager and I knew too much about computers. So that's how I learned about networking. And then when
you didn't like rules, probably, just like
and
me.
I didn't like rules, again, teenager. So after that, I went to University of Cincinnati, which is where I'm from, and I studied biology because I already knew so much about computers. The reason I studied biology is I was interested in things like AI, and I thought, well, the best way to learn about
even at that time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So I thought the best way to learn about intelligence is to study the only actual example of something that we have that's intelligent, which is life. I mean, we don't. It's
and
like,
especially our own life.
it's like if you want to know how to fly, you look at what's flying and you see a bird and you go, oh, maybe wings are a good idea. It's the same kind of principle. I thought, well, biology is the only thing that's actually intelligent.
Yeah.
So
It's the basis for all life.
We should study that and understand it.
And everything in biology begets chemistry, which begets, chemical engineering.
Yeah, so I actually did some work in that field, data warehousing and machine learning and stuff like that. But I was also always really into things like encryption and networking, and so I have kind of a long meandering path. I'd take up the entire show if I gave you my whole background, but lots of different things.
Well, what's important is I believe that you've given yourself enough background of science and data to really take your company into the next level.
Yeah.
So, background though from Red, how long did you work with Red?
I only worked for Red for about 2 years.
Okay.
I was planning on being there longer, but then this thing started to really, really take off, and that was kind of unexpected. I didn't expect it.
And where was it born? And at what moment did you see there was a need there?
I started working on ZeroTier actually in my spare time as a side project, even before I joined Red. So before I worked for Red doing image processing, I worked for the world's largest weather data center in North Carolina. And I actually worked as a contractor for the federal government, so I had secret clearance and everything. It was kind of neat.
Because you're probably touching satellites in some way.
Well, I was maintaining systems that do things like send weather reports to airports, so it was
Okay.
considered critical infrastructure. But
Fair enough.
one of the things I did there, I did a lot of different things there, but one of them was maintain networks. And I'd had ideas for years about how networking could be better, but when it was my job to actually maintain these big complex networks, and they did a lot of stuff with like collaborating with universities because they were kind of a research institution too. It was almost like a rage project. Like I realized like the way we do networking is so terrible.
Well,
it's just so
it was
terrible.
never meant to handle all these different types of devices.
It's sort of short-term hacks on top of short-term hacks because originally, like I said, you just had a box that sat in one place and you plugged it into the wall, and that was easy. But now we have everything mobile, and now we have all these layers of firewalls and all this other complexity, and nobody has really gone back and rethought this. So I decided to just start implementing some of this stuff, and to make a long story short, I implemented it, put it out there as an open source project, and it really took off, and it's continuing to take off. We've had an average of anywhere from 12 to 14% monthly growth for the last 3 years.
Let's talk about open source. My brother, he's also a programmer, a developer, and he believes strongly in open source because what you're doing is you're providing a solution to the world that's really bettering the world.
Yeah.
Number one. But you're doing it in a way where in the back end you're also offering support, and that's where you can provide your revenue stream, which is more from the support and the sort of premium add-ons that go on beyond that solution.
Yeah, it's challenging, but it's also, I think, it's the right way to move forward, especially in ZeroTier's field and my field right now, because in networking and security, things that are not open source are at a huge disadvantage because people like to be able to audit them for security. They like to be able to port them to different platforms, and most of the users in that community really like open source.
Right.
It makes the business aspect a little more challenging, but it can be done. I mean, there was just a company that is now going public called MongoDB that developed a database for web applications and
I've
stuff.
heard of it, yeah.
And they were open source, and they've gotten absolutely huge. They're now going public. It can definitely be done. What we do is we do a mixture of service and support, and we also have a certain kind of open source license where it's free to use, but if you want to actually take our source code and build it into a closed, like, proprietary product,
sellable
basically
product, right.
almost like rebranding or reselling,
Right.
you have to get a different license from us. So
Right.
we have a licensing model too. So we have a licensing model and a service model and a support model at the same time, and we kind of bundle all that together.
And so far, that's worked for you. Talk to me about the revenue path. You don't have to talk about specific numbers, but the revenue path to kind of when you started to actually see that pickup, that traction of revenue.
Well, in the beginning, I was just focused on getting it out there, and for a long time, even after we raised angel funding, we were focused primarily on just growth of getting the product out there. We're now starting to shift more toward a revenue focus, and that means just putting online more of these value adds and trying to sign up more enterprise customers.
And of course, sales and getting more customers to sign up.
So we're kind of at that inflection point. There was always some revenue model in place because I wanted it for the, I've heard it called like a minimum viable revenue model, but the idea is that it gives you some kind of signal about who's willing to pay for your product. And that tells you something, and that tells you something about who your customer base really is. Because when you have a product out there that a lot of people use, you can have lots of different people that use it, but most of those people might be people who would never pay. So you want to know who are the users that are paying. And in our case,
standing there with the cash in hand.
And in our case, it's primarily businesses. And so what we're doing is building more business-oriented products. We're getting ready to launch our first hardware product. I should have brought it to, well, that would be a little premature, but we're getting ready to launch.
Is it in prototype phase?
It's in prototype phase. We've actually prototyped out the hardware. I have a physical thing I can hold. We're doing the software side right now, but it's going to be basically like a physical port into one of these virtual networks, so that way you can, instead of putting ZeroTier on all your devices, you could just plug your whole office into a virtual network, or you could also plug in devices that can't actually run our software, so things like printers, fax machines,
non-smart devices.
And for this industry, I mean, you have all these internet-enabled cameras and lighting equipment and all these other things that work on a set.
But they don't have the ability to install something on there that would then
you can't install our software on a camera usually,
right?
And not unless it's like a high-end one with an operating system on it or something. But
which are happening. I mean,
yeah, there are some of those. There's some cameras now that run Android that you can put our Android app on, but
TVs that even run Android too.
Yes. But for a lot of things, what this box will let you do is it'll give you just a physical port or a Wi-Fi network that you can connect to, and that will put you on the virtual network. So you can connect anything you want. You can even connect industrial devices that don't even
like a factory machine.
That don't even speak standard protocols. Some of these devices have like weird ways of communicating. You can even connect those. So that's going to be our first hardware product, and it just interoperates with all the rest of our software.
Amazing stuff. So the angel funding, when did that happen? How long did that happen from your inception to when you had an MVP to kind of?
I'd say about 2 years from inception to first angel funding. We're now halfway through a second bunch of angel funding. But it was about 2 years, and the way it happened is interesting. I've worked with other startups and in the sort of startup world, and I've never seen this before. The first round of angel funding came from two people who were actually using the product, who independently approached and said, one of them said,
we love what you're doing.
Well, yeah, one of them said he's actually never tried something out and then immediately gone to look and see if they're raising anything. And so that's how the initial. So
your customer became your investor, and is continued obviously to be a customer.
Sure. They've actually been evangelists too. They've been going around telling people about us. But it's we're at that sort of inflection point between like focusing on growth and the early adopters and trying to go into the enterprise. And it's funny because it's really exciting because we're getting more and more attention now. But it also gets to be in some ways like more of a grind, like in the trenches at this point than it was, a year or so ago. It's
Now,
like
when I was in
really
I was in your war room, I mean,
Yeah.
every startup has a war room.
Yeah,
and
we have a war room. It's,
there's the board with all the,
yeah.
the due diligence and the action items and so on. And you showed me an image of the customer map, the sort of
yeah.
image of all the devices. I wish we could show the image of the.
Yeah. Well, we can't actually take 100% census because it's not. We can't read your data or see what you're doing
Right.
with it or any of that. But what we can do is we can kind of scan the network, and we can use what are called IP geolocation databases, and it just gives us like an approximate idea, like basically what city or state are you in. So we have this map where we can show approximately where most of the devices are, and it's all over the world.
All over the world. So
Africa,
the customers may not be all over the
everywhere.
world, but the devices are.
The devices are, and the customers are too. I mean,
Yeah.
I just chatted with somebody through our support portal in Ghana today. So we have
And
users.
what were they doing? I mean,
they
if
were.
I may ask.
I don't know in detail, but looking at the domain and who it was, I think it was somebody over there for business reasons.
Okay. But
probably
he needed to
working-
connect back to probably something either
Yep.
here or somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, we also have. What's cool is you'll see GeoIP little location dots on these obscure little islands in the middle of the Atlantic and the Pacific. And what it is a lot of those islands are kind of business, like offshore
points.
business centers and meeting points. And so people use this to network from there. So, but what they do is they create these encrypted virtual networks, and then as far as they're concerned, they're always in the same office.
Yeah.
You can be on an airplane.
It
You can
really is
yeah.
virtual, in other words.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the.
And it's very simple to set up. 95% of the time, you don't have to change anything on your network. You just install this thing and join a network, and you're done.
Amazing, amazing. So, building a team here locally, development outside of here. How did you form your team here in this area?
Just well, one of my team members is actually an old friend of mine, so he joined, and the other two we just found through a site called AngelList, which is it's a site where startups that are looking for either funding or networking can kind of create their own profiles, and there's also a job board on there. And I used that because the people that look for jobs on AngelList tend to be people who are interested in working for startups. So it kind of gives
They're accepting also of the terms of, I may not have a perfect office space, I may not have my own desk, I may need to even work with sweat equity to some degree for a period of time.
Luckily we haven't had to do much of that, but we definitely have a small office space and that sort of thing. So, and you don't get free sushi.
And
or
it's
anything
free.
like that.
AngelList is free.
Yeah, it's free for that.
It's free to
purpose
list
at
your
least.
company, and it's free to list business.
So that's how we found
jobs.
people, and I found that the talent pool around here is actually excellent.
Yeah.
It's very good.
How many team members do you have now?
There's 4 of us, including me. So there's 3 employees and myself.
And you have customer bases around the world and growing.
Tens of thousands of people around the world using it, and more growing every day. So it's getting.
How have you been managing that growth? Because it is a. I know you're mentioning different inflection points, but how do you manage that growth that's now going global and stay local with your management of everything?
One nice thing is that the software actually really does tend to work very well, and so we don't have a lot of support requests, which is really good. We have had some issues lately, just juggling all the different support requests and everything else. And right now, I'm kind of like there's just so many different things going on. I think one of the hardest things about being the sole founder of a company is it's not even so much the time, it's the cognitive load. It's the amount of stuff that's happening at once that you have to pay attention to.
It always seems like, to me, you can plan as much as you want as a startup, but the minute that opportunity starts to really knock, it's floods. It comes in all at once, and there's something to do every minute.
It comes in waves. Like there will be kind of these lulls where it's like nothing really new happens, and then we'll get tons of attention all of a sudden, and like all sorts of people will come in. So it kind of comes in these waves. We're probably going to have another wave soon, just because we're getting a lot of, including this and other things, media coverage right now, which is kind of new for us. So
well, including my startup here, and really appreciate you, Adam, coming out and talking about this technology. Something that appeals to me too about Adam is you're working small but thinking really big, and you're also, again, this open source strategy really kind of is non-threatening in a way. You're going to companies, offering them something free of charge to begin with, and then saying, hey, we're here to support you if you need help.
Yeah. And we can also offer extra products on top of that. So when people use this, more seriously, they usually want like a nice management interface and stuff like that. They also want support. They also want, and we have several larger companies that have licensed this to incorporate into products, including one that just shipped and went off without incident. It was really
so
good.
in that case, are you receiving that revenue as a percentage of their sales, or is it just a licensing fee that's
It's
flat
it's a
fee?
continuous licensing fee.
Okay. Sort of a period, 1 to 5 years, 20 years, whatever it is. Okay.
Yeah.
What are some of the notable use cases that you've kind of been surprised by, maybe?
Oh, wow. Surprised by. I guess the most common one is people just with like complicated network setups that are looking to simplify them. One of my favorite is there's been some people looking at building this into IP cameras and mobile apps. That's kind of neat. Trying to think of notable ones that are surprising. The thing is, our product is all encrypted, so I can't necessarily see what people are doing with it.
Right.
I think one of my favorites, and this is not a paying use case. This is just somebody using the open source. But there's a community Wi-Fi network, kind of mesh Wi-Fi network in Berlin, and they're using this to connect all the different wireless cells together. So that one was kind of
It's provided
neat.
maybe by the city?
No, it's provided by just volunteers. All these volunteers just run open Wi-Fi points and link them all together and make this big network.
So it sounds like there's a group of open source advocates that want to actually exploit your open source project.
So that was kind of a neat one. But yeah, there's lots of other things. The most common ones are connecting like cloud resources and things like that. So.
What's your management style? What do you like as a boss? I mean, every CEO has a different style.
Yeah, I'm not really a big micromanager, and in fact, I'm so busy with a lot of different stuff. One of the biggest qualities I look for is people that can just self-direct.
Yep.
I don't even if I was a micromanager, I wouldn't have time, because I'm doing. I still do a lot of engineering. I'm actually a big believer in that.
Continuing to innovate even yourself.
Yeah, continuing to do
push
engineering.
yourself to innovate. Right?
Yeah. I continue to do engineering, and my style is I tend to try to think very far ahead, and between engineering and management and marketing, I try to plan to be a step or two ahead of where we are right now. So I'll get something going, but then once that thing is going, I'll be thinking a couple steps ahead to what could happen, 6 months or a year from now, so that when that comes, it looks like we just come out, we already have something, but yeah.
What's your methodology for prioritizing some of those future projects? Because one of the challenges I always face is I have these great ideas and I want to start to pursue them, but if I add one more thing on my plate, something's going to fall off.
If I had an answer for that, then no, I really don't think there's a single good answer for that. And I think one of the interesting things about entrepreneurship is you sometimes read these business books that are like, here's how you should be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Here's how you should do it. And I can tell you for a fact that most of that stuff is nonsense.
Total.
And the reason I can tell you that for a fact is if there were a formula or a methodology for founding successful businesses, building successful products, there would not be any entrepreneurs.
And there'd be a long line of people waiting to
Well, no, there wouldn't be any entrepreneurs, because what would happen is venture capital funds and big companies and banks would just run that methodology themselves and keep 100%.
They just keep putting money into it and hiring those people and just following
And the fact that entrepreneurs exist as a job description in a way, and the fact that you're able to go out and raise money for a product and have somebody else basically give you equity investment to build something is sort of proof that there's no simple little formula that you can put in a box. Because if there were, they would just industrialize it, and entrepreneurs would all be out of work.
I really love that attitude, because really what you're saying is that you bring something to the table that nobody else does.
It's one of those one of those
just
jobs.
The process.
It's highly individual, and I also look for that in team members. Everyone that works for our team is sort of the same way. They're self-directed. They have their own ideas. It's the opposite of working in a huge bureaucracy. There's no rules. Nobody knows how to do it. If they did, they already would have done it. And it's fun, but it's kind of it's exciting. It tends to oscillate between like. I'll kind of oscillate between thinking I'm going to conquer the world and thinking it's going to fail, and then thinking I'm going to conquer the world and thinking it's going to fail.
When it's at that moment you think it's going to fail, what are some of the things you do right away that just kind of
just keep going,
just keep pushing,
you just keep
forge
pushing.
on.
You just like ignore that feeling and keep pushing.
I like to say that there are moments where people go caving and they have to bring a certain amount of water and supplies to get to where they're going.
Yep.
And there's a point at which you actually are far beyond the supplies to return.
Yep.
But you know if you keep going ahead, you're going to get to that fresh water.
Yeah. That's the most important thing is that, and also when you get up here and you think you're going to conquer the world, it's also important to stay, rational and not make decisions that are too impetuous there. So it's important to kind of ride that emotional roller coaster that comes with it, but to stay, rational
focused
and level and focused all through that and just kind of like ride it.
And to add to all the everything that you have to wear and every hat you wear at work, you have also a home life. You have 2 young ones at home.
Got a beautiful wife and a 4.5-year-old daughter and a 2-month-old daughter.
Congratulations.
So,
Pretty exciting.
So 3 children, 1 startup and 2 kids. Yeah.
But the family life is always the most important, and being able to balance that is always a challenge.
Yeah, I've managed to keep my weekends clear and usually my evenings. The most important thing, I mean, some people say like you can't do that kind of thing. I think the most important thing is just not to waste time and work really efficiently.
Yeah.
And then you can set aside other time. The other thing is, a lot of people, there's this sort of macho thing in Silicon Valley, but I'm working 90 hours a week. What they're really doing is working 40 hours a week and browsing Facebook 30 hours a week. And or they're exaggerating how much they're actually working because it's like a macho thing. But I think that there's actually scientific research that shows that, especially for like really intellectual work, if you get beyond about 50 hours a week, you're not productive. You're not productive.
You can't be. And your creativity starts to
and you start to just burn out. So I can do that for short periods of time, but if it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you just have to keep pushing. Like
the ones that sprint either succeed radically or they fail miserably. Correct?
Actually, most of the ones that succeed radically suddenly actually are 7 or 8 years old.
That's true. It's a momentum.
Yeah, like for example, you look into the background of something like Airbnb and you find out I forget what it was, but had a different name before that. The founder had a slightly different idea before that, and then before that it was like this rough prototype, and then before that it was like some crazy
It's not your first go around.
No, and these things take a long time to actually get going, and people don't tend to hear about them until they hit that inflection point. So it creates this illusion that they're overnight, when in reality it takes longer than that.
Well, interesting story, Adam. You have a very technical background. You've thought of something that's truly useful, functional. It works. Apparently, it works so well. You don't have a whole lot of support
That's
requests.
a good thing. Of the 3 children, it wakes me up at night the least. So that's good.
That's awesome. And again, you're one of your best customers became not only your investor but your evangelist, and that always helps as well. You have a great testimony, get story to tell. I hope that all of you out there can really look into ZeroTier, ZeroTier.com.
Yep.
I imagine it's a website. It's available for every kind of device, web,
mobile. almost anything with a chip in it. This will run on as Android, iOS, Mac, Windows, Linux, BSD, all sorts of other stuff.
And there's an open source project on GitHub, so you can check out the GitHub if you want to download the SDK.
Yeah, it's linked from our site. So if you go to our site, you can go to the download page. You can go to the pull-down menus. There's a manual. There's links to GitHub and everything.
And you can start using it tomorrow because, again, it's free and open source. So there's no reason to. If you're a technical systems engineer, networker, you have a lot of complex devices in your environment, check out ZeroTier. And Adam, really want to appreciate you for coming down to talk with us here at myStartUp.Live.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Wish you the best of luck in the future. And we'll see you next time and next week on myStartUp.Live. Thanks so much, and I'm Kevin Allen.